Property ownership comes with a lot of questions, and when damage happens, those questions get a lot more serious. Restoration 101 is a resource for property owners, managers, and industry professionals who want straight answers about the restoration process, the insurance process, and how to make smart decisions when it counts. This is Restoration 101, brought to you by Restoration One of Austin.
All right, man. Here we are again, Restoration 101. I am Robert, VP of Development at Restoration One, and this is.
I'm Hector. I'm one of the project managers on the mitigation side.
All right, and today we're doing Restoration 101 stories from the field. We've covered a couple of topics before on processes, basically, but now we're going to go ahead and dive into a couple of files, actually, just to go over what really happens in our world from day in and day out. All right, first thing we're going to jump into, let's see what we have here. And Hector, you're going to pull this up. It's going to be, this came in as, believe it or not, this was flagged as medium priority. A homeowner came home from vacation to find ceiling collapsed in the kitchen, bedroom, and closet. Leak was in the attic. The water is shut off. Plumber's coming this afternoon. He wanted us there ASAP to try and save some of the floors. So family was out on vacation, man. You're having a good time, enjoying yourselves. You come back going, you know what? I got a couple days to reset before work starts on Monday. Get home, fight traffic, open up the door. And what are we looking at, Hector? What is this homeowner looking at?
We're looking at pretty extensive damage here at this home. Like you mentioned, the homeowner was out of town. I'm not sure exactly how long he was out of town for, but he comes home to find his kitchen ceiling on the countertop where it's not supposed to be. And not only that, but there was some standing water. Some places had about an inch of standing water throughout the home, and definitely not what he was expecting to come home to.
Right. Was it a one-story house or two-story house?
This is a single-story house. The water heater is in the attic.
Okay.
So a lot of water pretty much came down and affected the kitchen, the living room. It's a pretty large kitchen. We have a master closet that's affected, a couple closets throughout the home, pantry. So a lot of drywall, cabinets, things of that nature that have been affected.
So you have a homeowner where, believe it or not, here in Texas, in some areas of town, water heaters were greenlit to be put into an attic, which is quite frankly insane from my opinion, because it's not a question of if, but when something happens. And when that failure does happen, all hell can break loose because of something like this.
Been told it was to save some space inside the home, but I agree.
Yeah.
When I was looking at homes for myself, I was looking at homes that either had a water heater closet. In my case, it was in a garage, so out of the way, out of the space.
Yeah, much better.
Don't have to worry about water raining down on me or in one of the rooms when we're coming back home.
So, all right, homeowner walks in the door and literally their ceiling has collapsed in multiple places.
Yeah.
And it's all over the place, floors everywhere. And because your water heater is tied to your main water line, there's just been an influx of water just coming through. Right?
Yeah. It's been pumping. Again, I'm not sure exactly how long or when the water leak originated. So at that point, the homeowner had already identified the source. He had reached out to the plumber. The plumbers had been out there. They turned off the water. They're in the process of replacing the water heater.
Right.
So that was pretty much our introduction point to this project.
All right. Now, we've touched base on stuff in the past about classifications of water, category 2, category 3, because all of the building materials that have been compromised. Well, one, is this a category 2 water loss or is it category 3, which is a different deal?
We're considering it as a category 2 loss. The water is clean water. However, it has made its way through insulation, dust, different material and debris. It's also been sitting for, we're thinking a couple days. Again, we're not exactly sure exactly how long, but it's not grossly contaminated water yet. So that's the reason why we're considering a category 2 loss in this case.
Now, people need to understand whenever something like this does happen, because it does. This is a very highly traumatic state. You've been on vacation, you think everything is good, you come home, and literally your ceiling has caved in and there's water all over the place.
Yeah.
So now this immediately goes into a traumatic event. They luckily called a plumber out there to figure out what the issue is and, more importantly, to stop the flow of water. And so our entry point when we come in is to try to make some kind of sense of what all this is.
Correct. Yeah. So we're brought in. One of our first responders Great guy. He knows the process in and out. He goes out there and he gives me a call and he's like, "Oh man." And at the time, he hadn't fully identified the full extent of the damage, but
Right.
he already knew that because of the standing water,
Right.
time was of the essence. So he made that call. He said, "Hey, get your team ready. I'm in the process of getting all the documents pretty much in line. We're definitely going to need to have water extraction services out here this afternoon." Like you mentioned earlier, the main priority was trying to stabilize and see if floors can be salvaged. I think at the end of that inspection, we determined that due to the warpage, some staining, we were going to take a different approach with the floors. But our first responder did a great job, getting out there, getting the water pretty much extracted, so that way that water did not continue to seep into different rooms and cause any more damage than it already had.
Right. And so, from a scoping process, whenever something like this happens, what's going to be the first thing that a homeowner should expect whenever one of our representatives goes in there to have an entry point that's as wild as this one? What's going to be the first thing that the tech does?
Well, really, I guess honestly, just figure out and assess any potential risk. When there's standing water, we want to make sure that there isn't any electrical concerns, right? There isn't any exposed wires, making sure that not only he's safe, but the homeowners are safe. Once he establishes the fact that there isn't any concerns at that point, it's really just a matter of figuring out one, has that water been shut off and been replaced? In this case, repaired. In
Hmm.
this case, we were able to get that confirmed. And then in this case, again, making sure that we are getting a lot of that standing water removed
Hmm.
so that way we can then further assess the damage to the cabinets, drywall, baseboards, flooring, pretty much any of the materials that have been affected. And that's pretty much what his order of operations would be going into it. We could definitely jump into a lot of the
Oh
photos
yeah,
and
yeah,
the
yeah.
file
Sure,
and kind of
sure.
walk you
I want
through
to see just exactly
what we're seeing.
how many rooms were affected on something like this.
So in this file here, we have starting off in the kitchen. Again, this is where the homeowner discovered the ceiling had collapsed. We have the living room. We have a closet, a bathroom,
It's four,
a master bedroom,
five,
a dining room,
six,
hallway, a
seven,
laundry room,
8,
pantry, a toilet room.
10,
This was a closet. It's labeled as a bathroom pantry, but it's a closet.
11,
And then the attic itself.
12. So you have 12 affected rooms, basically.
12 affected areas. Yes, sir.
12 affected areas. And with 12 affected areas, you've got drywall, you have insulation, you have cabinets. It looks like that's that tile. Looks like
That is
tile.
tile. We
Okay.
have some hardwood
Oh,
floors.
there's
We
a
have some
win.
carpets.
There's a win. There's at least tile down there. Now, I wonder if there's water behind the fridge.
We're definitely gonna have to remove the fridge. As of right now, we're waiting on some contents
That's
to
a
be
whole nother thing
relocated.
that we have and we're going to get into is contents.
We'll definitely have to reassess
Right, because I'm
the
looking
extent of the damage.
at compromised ceilings. I saw insulation hanging down in there, and so water likes to follow the path of least resistance, and gravity takes it places. And so, whenever you've got a failure of that magnitude up in an attic, so if that's a standard 40-gallon water heater, you're looking at 40 gallons. Initially, that's going to dump. And then depending on how long they were out, you literally have a garden hose that's just dumping water into your house. And so since water likes to follow the path of least resistance and gravity takes it places, once it permeates and hits the floor, it all has to go somewhere. And so gravity will take it wherever it needs to go. And that's how you end up with 12 affected areas in a home.
Yep, I'll show you this picture here. This one's pretty interesting here. This is a dining room. And a lot of the water extraction was done here, and
I wonder
specifically,
if that piano is compromised.
it may be compromised.
Jesus. Yeah.
And this is all during the initial file creation, but
Well,
we can
luckily, we're treating it
see
as a category two, so we have to do a flood cut.
we can see here where it's hard to tell, but
Right.
there's a
There was a,
reflection. There's a reflection here. So there's
yeah,
some standing water
right.
in this area here. Considering this is an exterior wall, again, we're definitely have to rescope once all the contents are out and we
Hmm.
have full access to the home. But maybe we may have to do a flood cut.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
We
going to be an
might.
insulated wall.
And so,
Fine.
for clarification on the flood cut stuff, what's the difference between a regular cut and a flood cut?
Flood cut typically is just a industry standard term that we use. There's different types of flood cuts, right? So there's a 2-foot flood cut, 4-foot flood cut. Um, Typically, a 2-foot flood cut would be performed on exterior walls,
Okay.
anything containing insulation. That way, we can go ahead and remove that drywall, access the insulation, and then provide dehumidified air to the framing. So that way, we can get that pretty much dried up.
Now, when you say
Dry our
2 foot, what exactly does that mean?
2-foot flood cuts are when we remove the first 2 feet of the base of the wall, starting from the floor. We go 2 feet up, we make a mark, and then depending on the extent or the linear footage of that wall, we follow that cut. So we were removing pretty much the base
Drywall and insulation.
insulation.
And
4-foot
that's
flood cut would be, 4 feet, same process, right? We pretty much remove 4 feet from the concrete slab or whatever floor there is, 4 feet up.
per industry standard
Yes, sir.
regulations.
Mhm.
So, all right. So you go in there. The entry point on the first responder is to, all right, help the homeowner navigate. Okay, this is what the process looks like. So the first thing is going to be an initial scope documentation, because in our world, if you don't document it, it never happened. And so now, after the first responder goes over there and does an assessment and figures out, okay, pictures, documentation, moisture readings, there's 12 rooms affected while the homeowner is probably in a state of shock. What would be the next process that needs to take hold after that?
So our first responder was able to capture all the photos that we needed to. Right, we documented the extraction, gathered a preliminary scope. We've shared a file with the adjusters, so that way we can more or less keep them in the loop as far as what's going on, what
Okay.
damage we expect. In this case, because of the amount of rooms that were affected
Mhm.
and the contents, we definitely need to address the contents next. So we're in the process of getting those contents pretty much assessed, right,
Okay.
for any type of loss, and then also removed from the home.
Okay. So the
Via
insurance
packet
company had been notified and a claim number was set in place.
was set in
And
place.
then that next step would be to get or notify your insurance company to get a claim number.
A claim number. Once we have that claim number, again, an adjuster gets assigned, and then we have that point of contact for the adjuster. This adjuster has been fairly responsive.
Okay.
He reached out to me as of this morning, just to kind of more or less, again, see where we're at, get a progress update, and more or less see what the status of the project is.
So on the content side of things, well, I guess on the classifications for insurance companies, does this level of damage, does this change an SOP with insurance carriers? Does it hit a certain dollar amount that
Mm,
then kicks it up to a different?
it can, depending on the depending on the amount of rooms that are affected, or the value associated with, set rooms.
Yeah.
It can go from, an adjuster to a senior level adjuster. Sometimes, depending on the carrier, they may have an adjuster for contents. They may split it up differently. For the most part, it doesn't necessarily slow down the process on our front. There is sometimes where we're waiting on approval for contents,
Mhm.
and in that case, what we do is it's called stabilization.
Okay.
So what we do is we go in there, we make sure that, again, any of the standing water is extracted. If there's any carpet padding, typically we go ahead and remove that. And then we go ahead and set, stabilizing equipment
Mhm.
consisting of dehumidifiers to more or less regulate the areas. In the meantime, while we are working on getting approval for set scope of work, in this case, content. But what makes this interesting is we had two similar projects. Um, as far as homeowners being away from their home on
Uh-huh.
vacation and then coming back and finding hidden damages. So where this is still a water loss, we're
Mhm.
moving on it fairly quick. The extent of the damage is still pretty much considered very much a water, again, a more or less a water
Yeah,
project.
water loss. So, okay, so now the contents, all right, you've deemed scope of work for the most part that it's 12 affected areas. Working with a homeowner has a claim number. Now, apparently, obviously, there's contents that are compromised. What needs to happen on a content standpoint? You have all these materials. The homeowner wants to get us in there to start the mitigation
Mhm.
process. You've set equipment to stabilize the environment on humidity and moisture. There's your first step. You're allowing the homeowner some space to go, okay, now contents need to be taken care of.
Mhm.
We don't know what contents have been compromised. We don't know where the contents are going to go. Homeowner has no idea kind of what to do with all this. So, what needs to happen from a content standpoint?
A content standpoint, we pretty much assess the contents. We need to figure out what has been affected in terms of it being salvageable or not.
Okay.
Sometimes we have rugs that can be cleaned, right, depending on the category of water. Other times there's that contents are non-salvageable, right? So that goes into an inventory sheet. what's salvageable, what's not.
Who makes that determination?
Typically, depending on the restoration company, right? If you do contents in house, you'll
Mhm.
have a contents department, and all that process is pretty much handled in house.
Okay.
Here at Restoration One, we don't have a contents per se department. So we do partner with different vendors in order to provide those pack out
Okay.
services. And so what we've done here is during the initial setup, right? You file a claim,
Mhm.
you essentially assess the extent of the damage. The next call is to bring them in. They've already essentially provided an inspection. They're in the process of getting approval from the adjuster. And then today, we're actually starting in the areas that we have access to.
Okay.
So we're starting some demolition, while some of the other areas, again, due to the contents, need to be approved before
Okay.
we start.
So the carrier needs to approve the scope of work in dealing with contents.
Correct.
We can't go in there and just start moving contents around. We have to get.
Due to liability purposes, right? Like in this case, we have a very expensive piano.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at.
And
I was looking, I
so,
wonder if that piano's been
as you
compromised.
know, you move pianos
Right.
and
Right.
you're looking at retuning things,
All kinds of stuff.
all kinds of stuff. So
Right.
we want to make sure that the contents are handled by the professionals, right? We want to make sure they don't get affected, as well as for liability purposes on our end as well. We
Mhm.
don't want to be on the hook for a very expensive piano,
Right.
tables, furniture, etc. Um,
So, all right. So, from a timeline standpoint, because obviously the homeowner now is no longer stress free from their stress free vacation that they had, because now they've had this entry point. Now, all right, what are we going to do? So, now we're looking in, okay, contents need to be handled. So, we're going to set them in line with the vendor that specializes in contents while we wait for approval from the carrier to understand what's going to go. Right. The clock is ticking. The homeowner wants to see stuff done ASAP. So now what are we looking like, I guess, from a mitigation standpoint? And more importantly, clearly a homeowner isn't going to be living in this house anytime soon. So what are we looking at on that?
Yeah, so to that point, along with the pack outs, he's also looking for temporary housing accommodations. He'll be moving out for the duration of the mitigation,
Mhm.
and then he'll consider whether most likely they'll move out for the entirety of the project.
Sure. Just
Um,
based on if you got 12 affected rooms.
exactly. Something to consider there too, depending on how policies are set up,
Hmm.
is a limit or a cap on assisted living accommodations, or temporary housing accommodations.
Yeah.
So they need to factor in that limit, or cap,
Mm.
depending on where they're going to be staying and for how long they're going to be
Right.
staying.
And that, again, that'll go all goes down into who your carrier is and what policy you have that makes that determination.
Mhm.
Which everything we always circle back around is homeowners, please know your policy.
Or
Please know your
he
policy.
may choose to go on another vacation
Right.
to get away from all this, but
Right.
who
Right. He
knows?
needs to go back into stress free.
For sure.
Oh,
We
but,
take care of the damage, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
yeah. So, all right. So, not only is it 12 rooms, and so you're going to have to get an unbelievably large amount of mitigation work. Then there's contents that need to be inventoried and packed out and stored, which is a different invoicing line item for a carrier and price point. And then because you clearly can't live in this house, then a determination needs to be made on where you're going to stay
Yeah.
and for how long. And so you've got all of these different variables that need to take place before actual mitigation work actually starts.
Correct. Some of those again are moving
Right.
simultaneously. Again, like the pack out inspection. He's figuring out where he's going to essentially be
Right.
staying. We've already started in some of the rooms that we can.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
So we're doing stuff.
it does take some time. However, there's workarounds, right?
Sure.
There's a lot of things that we can do while we wait and try to minimize the damage.
Sure.
Again,
I mean,
prevent
like
this
you
from
said,
getting worse.
we're going to be starting here on areas that we can while they pack stuff
Yeah,
out.
but it is a process.
Right.
The biggest thing is really again just kind of more or less taking a step back,
Mhm.
breathing a little bit
Right.
as a homeowner, and really just taking one step at a time as far as
Right. One of the pictures you're looking at when you look into their kitchen and you pull up, it looks like they had an island kitchen.
they do have an island.
So again, like we talked about earlier, the water follows the path of least resistance, and gravity takes it places. So when you have a large amount of water from a water heater failure up in the attic,
Mhm.
all of that weight, gravity is going to pull it down. It compromises your ceiling. It floods your house. And from all appearances in the kitchen, the cabinets are compromised. And so, in some of the conversations that we've had, Typically, cabinets, depending on what they're made of, can either be salvaged or they can't be salvaged, and I'm
Correct.
not exactly sure what that's gonna be looking like here. But in the event that it can't be salvaged, that means all of their cabinets need to come out,
Correct. Well, at least lower cabinets,
at least
if
the
you
lower
know
cabinets, right? Not
if
the
they've been
uppers.
affected. Yeah, if the
Right.
uppers haven't been
But then
affected, then
again, it just depends.
correct. So like in this case, we see that there's two
Jesus,
types of
man.
cabinets,
I know,
right?
I see all of that exploded over
Yep.
there and that one where the
So for example, like this oven here,
yeah.
it probably isn't going to be salvageable,
No.
and that's where the contents group
That's
put
right. You
together
can't have it. You can't live in your house.
a loss sheet.
So I'm worried about that refrigerator back there if that's been compromised.
Potentially. Um, but yeah, to address your your earlier point with cabinets, anything that's lower cabinets have been soaking in
Right,
water for some time.
right.
It can swell. Sometimes we remove toe kicks, and the base of the cabinets is essentially crumbling
Right.
at times, depending on the materials. So we'll reevaluate it. We'll see if we'll make that determination whether it's something that can be saved and be
Mhm.
dried in place, or if it needs to be removed based off of the extent of the damage, as well as drying times too.
Sure.
So sometimes we attempt to dry it, we're not seeing enough progress. There's another material behind it potentially that we're also concerned about, microbial growth. So at that point, we'll make that call and we'll say, hey, you know what, we're going ahead and pull it, even though initially we started to
Right.
dry them in place.
Now, one of the crazy things in doing this is a lot of times homeowners are going to want to know what a scope is going to look like or a ballpark number or what have you. On something like this, it's damn near impossible to give an accurate scope of work considering the amount of water and the length of time and the amount of damage that was done to this. And so,
Yeah.
as contents comes out and as the mitigation, which is the removal of the affected material, starts to take place, more often than not, on large jobs like this where it's catastrophic, once you break that seed pod open, you start uncovering further and further damage that you didn't know was there because of contents being in the way. Again, drywall and insulation and wood has a wicking effect, and so it draws moisture up through the drywall and through the insulation, and then it starts to creep. And so as we start cutting things out, more often than not, you start to see an expand on what scopes are, and it just keeps it can theoretically keep going.
That's what keeps me busy. So at that point, communicating scope to clients, right? Changes in materials that we'll need to remove, as well as keeping adjusters, any material interested parties really up to speed on any changes. Communication is pretty much vital to the process. So
Sure.
anytime we're seeing a change in scope, an increase in demolition, an increase in drying times, we're gonna have to change our estimates
Yeah.
and scope of work in order to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's moving.
these are complex projects at the end of the day, right?
Sure.
Because of the magnitude and the uncertainty of a lot of these materials.
So, all right. In our world, the average mitigation on standard fare, you're looking anywhere between 3 to 5 to 7 days. Clearly, on something like this, it could be an extended timeline. And so, in your estimation, what do you think timelines might look on the mitigation side?
Um, it's a good question. I think on this one, as long as we can get approval within the next couple days or so, um, again, considering the floors are warped and they're stained, we're going to go
Yeah.
ahead and remove. The whole goal of category two is to try to, again, save as much materials as possible. However, if they're too far compromised, we're going to go ahead and remove them. There's no point of trying to dry something that's not,
Right.
it's not going to look good or go back to its original condition. So in this case, timelines, anticipate mitigation probably taking about closer to 2 weeks.
Okay.
2 weeks.
Yeah, it's actually not bad, all things considered,
hmm
honestly. Are there any red flags on the exterior wall side of things or no?
As of right now, no, but we'll definitely have to reassess everything and see where the water again has traveled. Like you said, water will take the path of least resistance. So if there's any changes in slope, right, as far as the
Mhm.
slab or any water underneath the floors, it can definitely go a little bit further than we anticipate.
I have yet to see a
Um,
level slab.
no, I mean it's always going to have a little bit of a
They're
give.
always gonna be pitch, man.
There's
That's just the way it works.
a level of
Yeah.
of clearance for slabs, but yeah, like to address your point, a lot of this stuff can change.
Mhm.
Some exterior walls may be affected. We'll dry what we can, and if we see any risk with other walls, let's say they're not drying in a timely manner, then we'll go ahead and remove those, the interior walls,
Yeah.
interior dry walls off.
From A mitigation standpoint on the PM side, do you see any potential red flags that the homeowner might experience from a carrier perspective?
On this one, not so much. He's being proactive, right? He's doing what he needs to do to get the process started. He's moving quickly. There was another one where, and this project has essentially been completed, right? We can talk about that project next. He did receive some type of pushback because of the ended up in denial of coverage, even though he did have a mold endorsement because of the length between when the leak originated to when he was essentially being proactive
Oh,
about
gotcha.
moving forward.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely get into that one.
Hmm.
All right. So, mitigation, which is the removal of affected material, drying out the structure, removal of the contents, you're looking probably about 2 weeks. And so, after mitigation has completed, then you have the homeowner sign your certificate of completion. That mitigation bundle gets buttoned up and submitted to the carrier for payment at
Hmm.
that point. Then that sets the table for reconstruction. And like we've touched on before, on in the restoration process, the easy part of it, believe it or not, is the mitigation portion of it. The reconstruction is where timelines start to drag.
Tend to slow down a little bit. At that point, the carrier's reviewing, our mitigation bundle, negotiating a settlement or
Sure.
paying us out, right? And that could take anywhere from a couple days to a week. After that, then our estimator comes in, provides a reconstruction estimate.
Mhm.
The client at that point is wanting to change anything, right? Different floors, whatever the case may be. We can provide a separate estimate for that as well, just depending on how the scope aligns. And then once we get the reconstruction estimate approved, requirements are met, the documents are signed, and then from that point on, materials procured, and then from there is finally the production dates get assigned. So
Right.
from the end of the mitigation to be the beginning of the actual reconstruction process, it could be sometimes again a couple weeks,
Yeah.
sometimes closer to a month or two. It just depends on how fast that process moves along.
Okay. Again, on the mid side, that's what you're looking at. This is definitely, these situations don't happen frequently, but they do happen. And in the years I've been doing this, these are probably the more traumatic ones because homeowners out of town and they have no idea what's happening until they walk in. Now, in the grand scheme of things, the way a homeowner is to prevent this is to know where your water shutoff is and turn it off when you go out of town.
Yeah.
Had the homeowner actually gone out to their meter and turned it off, this failure wouldn't have happened when they were out of town, and they could have very well have been home whenever this did happen and stopped the damage. Um,
Yeah, it's definitely a good idea. As well as maybe reaching out to a local plumber in your area as well. I know there is a sensor. There's different names for it. Leak alarm is the one that I'm most familiar
mm,
with. And it actually has a ball valve to where it sits in the water. If it's a tank, right,
mhm.
sits in the pan. And once it senses moisture, it actually has a ball valve, an electronic ball valve, where it's going to close the water
No,
supply.
nice.
I know that can help in certain cases. Definitely shutting off water, kind of more or less preparing your home before a
Right,
vacation or
right.
an extended time where you're not going to be there is a good idea.
Yeah, I used to laugh at my dad years ago for whenever he went out of town, even if it was just for 2 days when we go on a weekend trip. I'd turn off the water, be like, man, what's wrong with you, man? You're crazy.
You never know.
And then I got into this industry. I'm like, oh man, my dad really wasn't as crazy as I thought he was.
Did he ever have to go through water damage?
No,
No.
no, he in the 40 years he's been in the house, 40 plus years, he's only had one small failure in a water heater, and his
Well,
water heaters, their water heater is in the laundry room, but he caught it.
well,
But
better be prepared
oh
than.
yeah, no, absolutely. But then again, okay, when you're a kid, you always think your parents are crazy, and so as you get older, you realize that they're a lot smarter
Oh yeah.
than you thought they were.
Oh yeah.
All right, so this is a good one to kind of touch base on. The next one, let's talk about the next one. All right, man. All right, this next one, what we got here? I'll go ahead and read a brief description. Yet again, homeowner was out of town for a month. Returned to collapsed ceiling and master closet. Water stains also visible in adjacent bathroom. Plumber has been on site fixing the leak, and it was a water heater in the attic. Oh man. All right. We had a homeowner had a carrier that wasn't us out there, a service provider that wasn't us out there, and they didn't feel comfortable with that carrier, so they brought us in. Uh They have an insurance adjuster scheduled, and here we go. All right, let's take a look at this one here.
Sure. Just diving into it, similar to the other project.
Yeah.
Um, we'll go over the attic. This is where the water heater
Yet
was
again,
originally
water
installed.
heater up in the attic.
Now, with this particular project, it was a little over a month. He was actually gone for 3 months. He
Okay.
walks in, and similar to the other project, we have some ceilings and some insulation on the floor.
Okay.
So
See,
I'll
all
go
right.
back to the beginning.
Parts of ceiling on the floor along with insulation.
Mhm.
Let's count how many chambers, how many rooms were affected.
For this one, we have a bedroom.
One.
We have a master closet. This is where he
Oh yeah.
discovered
Oof.
the initial damage. We have a guest bathroom, a master bedroom, and then this is part of the master bedroom as well.
Okay.
So
All right. So
4
four.
areas.
4 rooms with one of them being a master and a master closet, and then up in an attic. That's a one-story home. Then I take it.
Correct. Yeah. No, this is a two-story home.
Two-story home.
Two-story home. Part of the upstairs is half of it is living spaces, right, or livable. The other area is an attic space.
Okay.
So again, the attic is where the water heater was located, along with certain other utilities. Homeowner walks in on a long trip
Yeah.
and goes
Still three
into
months. I'd say it's a long trip.
his master bathroom and master bedroom, as most people probably want to either take a shower or, just kind of want to change into some fresh clothes, and discovers that there's some insulation. So,
Well, the fact that he was out of town for 3 months is telling me that one, I'm in the wrong industry and I need his career. Oh man, oh, that's the growth.
we definitely see
And
some growth
I am
here.
not an environmentalist, so I'm not going to say that four-letter M word, but that looks like growth.
You're correct. So,
Oof, that changes everything
we definitely have some.
on his clothes, no less.
Oh, again, there's a lot of damage to some
Yeah.
of these
Oh
walls.
yeah, absolutely. And is that hardwood? That's wood flooring, isn't it?
That was engineered hardwood floor,
Engineered.
so it's
Oh,
glued
that's coming
down.
out.
Yeah, it did end up coming out. Now,
Oof.
there was damage here in the closet. However, this closet shares an adjoining wall with s- the bedroom.
Okay.
So what we ended up finding out once we started opening and removing the materials from the master closet side, as you can see here, is that a lot of the materials, again, that share that adjoining wall, were
Yeah.
also compromised. So we
Yeah.
ended up having to remove a lot of the drywall
Okay,
and
so
the
that was
flooring
different from
here.
what the initial scope was going to be.
Correct. And you can kind of see here where there's a T, right? This is the bathroom on this side.
Okay.
The bathroom also ended up being pretty heavily affected. The water heater was more or less right above where 3 to 4 rooms connect.
No, oh man.
So it affected all of them.
Yeah.
We could only see it originally in the bedroom, but once we started again opening up the walls, we ended up finding out that this loss grew pretty substantially. Now, where this project is a little different than the project we reviewed earlier is because there was visible growth in this case. There
What
was
needs to
already
happen
that
there
secondary damage.
when
So
that
in this case, we recommended they bring in an environmental hygienist because of the growth we're looking at, right?
Mhm.
Like you said earlier,
we're not
we're not
we're not environmentalists.
exactly. However, we do partner up with
Right.
different vendors, and so one of our vendors came in. They were able to capture different samples, right? In the meantime, we ended up containing the areas that were affected. The homeowner was concerned about a 1-year-old toddler being
Mm.
exposed. So as soon as they walked in, they're like, you know what? We're going to go ahead and stay
Especially when
with,
they see all that growth.
they're like, hey, you know what? We're going to go ahead and stay with some family members. So
Right.
they ended up staying down the street. We contained the areas. Environmentalists came in. They were able to take some samples, run those samples out to the lab.
What
They
was it?
did confirm elevated spore count, again, in these 4 rooms. After that, what they do is they provide you with a mold remediation protocol.
Okay.
And so once we got the protocol in, we came back in for a secondary assessment. That protocol basically become our guideline to clearance, set on where to set containments a lot of the times, how many air changes you have to have. Really goes into what's going to get you to clearance, what materials need to be removed, where to start. It can change too. Don't get me
Sure.
wrong. This one ended up changing. So we originally they didn't find any mold in the master bedroom. And again, once we started removing some of the materials in the bathroom, we actually ended up getting the protocol amended and included master bedroom as well.
Mm.
There was a little bit of growth underneath the tub. So nothing that was able to be tested for on the front end, but the end of the day, it was there. So it was good that we took it that extra step to make sure that there wasn't going to be any hazardous materials left behind in the long run.
So on something like this, when an environmental specialist gets plugged in and then they start doing their testing and then they give you a path for remediation, what happens when stuff, as you start the mitigation process, as stuff falls outside of that scope? What's the process for that? You just
A lot of times, if it's in the same room, we have a really good relationship with a lot of the consultants. We strategically partner with certain consultants again because we like the way that they work, the fact that they're able to provide a response in a timely manner. In this case, we shot him some pictures and let him know, hey, there's some stuff outside of the protocol here that we're finding. And right away, he was like, hey, you know what? Set containment here.
Mhm.
I'm going to go ahead and send you an updated protocol. He, within, I would say, in a couple hours, was able to put that together, send it to me and the client. And so, when we do come across, um, you know, additional rooms, they're able to get those added fairly quickly. Usually we have to remove, in this case, mold 2 feet past, any type of visible damage or any
Okay.
visible spores. We get graded, right? So once the work gets completed, they come in to do post clearance testing. So we want to make sure that we actually go not only right to where we're seeing the extent of the damage, but a little bit past that to make sure that there's not going to be anything else that
Right.
we're not seeing.
Right.
So there is changes. A lot of times, again, it's very fluid as far as what we're seeing and
Mhm.
how that can change. But the protocol also gets changed depending on the project.
Now, because mold is brought into the picture, then that changes, I guess, the classification on the scope of the project. It's all right because biohazard, I guess, at that point.
Correct. So at that point, you know, everything needs to be airtight as far as the containments go.
Okay, so you set up containment areas.
We set up containment areas, containment chambers, decontamination chambers in this case, right? They're
Mhm.
used to pretty much help decontaminate trash bags and our workers. It's basically a buffer between the areas where we're doing mold remediation and the areas that are going to be pretty much clear and good to go. So it's more or less more or less a decontamination
Right.
chamber, a cleaning spot. We do have to set things under negative pressure. And so as we're doing demolition, it's a way for the air scrubbers to essentially capture and remove and filter out any airborne particles
Okay.
rather than just essentially keeping it in what we call scrub mode, which is pretty much just going to be recycling the air that's inside that.
Now, the goal of that on the containment areas is to minimize the risk of spores infiltrating the rest of the house.
Correct. The last thing we want to do is, like, let's say, you see that growth or you see the mold on the wall. Now that we know that it's mold and
Mhm.
you don't set containment, and in this case, you take let's say a multi-tool sawzall to the walls, right? And now, as you can see, sometimes you can clearly see it, but there's going to be dust and all those spores are going to spread. They may go into different chambers. They may go into, in this case, a bathroom or a living room. And now you went
Is it
from having mold from, 2 or 3 rooms to now 5 rooms. And so a lot of times it affects the air quality. People get, very sick from exposure to it.
sure, and you said that they had a one-year-old?
They have a 1-year-old, so they're very concerned about this.
Of
Luckily,
course, yeah.
didn't get into the HVAC system, but
Okay.
during that time too, we're sealing off any returns
Mhm.
or supply ducts just to make sure that, nothing gets into
And that was
the
gonna be my next question is,
AC.
okay, what are the odds, or did the consultant look into I guess, the HVAC system to see if anything had been compromised in there?
Correct. Yeah, he did. He ran some swabs and some testing. Everything turned out clear in this case. So realistically, everything was pretty much structural. We're able to get everything removed, and we got clearance as of today. So
Okay,
this
so
morning.
all right, so clearance came in today. So they did post-clearance testing,
Mhm.
which means then that structure is technically deemed free of mold after that.
Correct. So what they do to provide some more clearance, there's a lot of mold, and black mold gets thrown around a lot.
Right,
A lot of
right.
times
Yeah,
you
it's a
don't
very
know if
vague
it's
term.
aspergillus or if it's there's thousands of different spores of mold that we are sometimes constantly exposed to. When you go outside, again, there's going to be mold in the natural environment.
Mm,
What we want to do, or what the consultant wants to test, is what is the spore count outside in basically a controlled environment, and then they test it to the air quality inside of the affected areas. That outside sample essentially becomes a baseline for us. We don't want to have any more mold spores or mold count inside of the controlled environments,
Okay.
inside of the containment zones. So that's how they pretty much are able to let us know and say, you're clear,
Mm,
or hey, there's still elevated spore counts in here. We need to go ahead and maybe remove more drywall. Maybe we need to do more cleaning.
okay.
Maybe we missed something, right?
Right.
Sometimes there's wood rot that, framing needs to be replaced. These air quality samples are very, very sensitive a lot of times. So little things can throw it off. So it's good that they're doing it to make sure that um, we're meeting the baseline requirements
Hmm.
or essentially the standards of clearance.
Hmm.
And that's how they identify whether this area is good to go or hey, you need to get back in there and you
Right.
need to do some more work.
Right. Now, one of the things that you touched on, so they were out for 3 months. However, now what kind of pushback are we looking at from coverage? Because you mentioned that there was some pushback.
Yeah,
So what kind of
he's having some difficulties with his carrier. The big word here and what resulted in denial of the claim is negligence.
how can he be negligent if he wasn't there?
That is not up
That,
to us to
right,
determine per se.
right, right, right,
However,
right.
it's something that is thrown out, and
Sure.
essentially it's something that isn't fixed yet. A lot of times, they can have discussions about this. In this particular case, the homeowner did have a mold endorsement. That mold endorsement did have a cap. However, because of the negligence or because this wasn't sudden and accidental,
Right,
right?
right,
Um,
right.
it's not considered a covered loss, or they're not considering it as a covered loss yet. Now, what the homeowner did was he's in the process of working with an independent adjuster that
Yeah.
can help interpret his policy, and that independent adjuster can then touch base with the carrier to figure out if in fact, their determination will stay as far as
Mhm.
denial, or if there's a way that, certain parts can be covered, maybe other parts can't. It's a long process, but it is an option the homeowners have at the
Oh,
end of the day.
yeah. I mean, especially when you think, okay, the price point of mitigation is one thing. The price point of mold remediation is a whole nother thing. And then you have the reconstruction cost. And so this guy was out of town for 3 months. And so the fact that he was out of town, all right, now you touched on something. We said third party. What does third party adjuster mean?
It's an independent adjuster. They don't work for carriers. They can,
Okay.
but you can also hire them directly. Yeah, you're basically a licensed adjuster in set state,
Yeah.
and you can choose to either work freely, right? So it depends on whether you want to take jobs from, a specific insurance provider, or if you want to work for independent homeowners in this
Hmm.
case. And so at that point, again, you're not working for the carrier.
Right.
In this particular case, he's working for the homeowner, interpreting the coverage that his policy allows for, and can have a little bit more of a understanding of the policy
Right.
to be able to go back to the carrier
Sure,
and
and justify. It's
discuss.
like, "Hey, man, how can how could he have not how could he have known that, something was happening in his house?"
Correct, as well as sudden and accidental, right? Like the leak was probably a sudden leak, right? It was probably
Right.
a certain burst of
Sure.
the whatever, the water line or the water heater, and he's acting as fast as he was able to
Yeah,
in this
I
case.
mean,
So.
he started acting as soon as he was came into his house and
Mhm.
realized, "Man, I've got a huge
Have a
problem."
problem.
Yeah, I got a huge problem. Um, yeah, this is an interesting one because, again, it's like it covers a few things, and yet again, had the homeowner shut off his water supply before going out of town for 3 months, he probably wouldn't have been in this position. But here we are. And so, okay. Now you said since it's claim denial at this point, typically mitigation projects go in one or two ways. It's either a claim that is valid and accepted by your carrier, and then it falls under carrier coverage, and then the homeowner is responsible for the deductible at that point. And then, or it goes into claim denial, then that goes into what's called self pay, where the homeowner has to front load the project and take care of it. So since this was initially a claim denial, does that shift it into self-pay? Or are we working with the homeowner to see?
It is a self-paying project for us at this point.
Okay.
More importantly, just because I'm not sure what the overall determination is gonna be at the end. So it does for us, it shifts over to a self-pay because that claim has already been denied, right?
Right.
In this case, he's working to overturn that
Hmm.
determination, which in set case, if it does get overturned or something changes, then he can seek reimbursement for
Sure.
whatever expenses he's already incurred. So
Makes sense.
doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be out of pocket the full extent if he's able to receive some type of reimbursement. Just depends.
Right.
Depends. But yeah, in this case, unfortunately, he did have to front load, like you said, a lot of
Yeah.
the upfront expense for the mold remediation, and then also reconstruction. Now he's out of bathroom and
Yeah, because if
floors that are
that's a claim denial,
continuous.
he's gonna have to also pay for recon.
Yep,
And as a
and
general rule, recon, you're looking at whatever your mitigation bill is at 3 or 4x multiplier
this would
on.
definitely probably be closer to 3-4x because of the continuous flooring alone.
Yeah.
It's a first floor is a pretty large square footage. I would say it's probably about a 3,000 square foot home, so it's a big one.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, unfortunate. And again, it's like nobody ever expects these things to happen. I mean, we don't expect them. And this is a very traumatic event for a homeowner, for anybody to experience because something as small or as harmless as, all right, I'm going to go out of town for a weekend or whatever the case may be. And the next thing you know, all hell breaks loose. And you could potentially, especially in this case, be out six figures.
That goes into being prepared as
Right.
being a homeowner, right?
Right.
You know, a little something very small like this can easily turn into,
Right.
you know,
Right.
something unexpected at the end of the day.
Yeah, the joys of homeownership.
The joys of homeownership.
Exactly. Well, is there anything you want to add to anything before we wrap it up?
No, not at this time. Again, really just making sure that you're prepared as a homeowner, not only financially, but
Right.
also try to do as best as you can to prepare the home for any type of extended trips or departures, any type of winterizing that may need to take place.
Right.
Definitely factor that in, but really just be prepared more than anything. A
Um,
lot of the stuff no one can really expect the unexpected, I guess.
yeah, I mean, and more importantly, homeowners, know your policy. Know your policy and understand that you are the advocates for your home and is well within your right to push back to carriers if they try, if you feel that they're not doing what they should be doing. Ultimately, you pay your premiums monthly, yearly, and so in order to protect you from stuff. And if you feel that they're not protecting, push back. It's well within your rights. Having said that, later.
That's a wrap on this episode of Restoration 101. Whether you're dealing with damage right now or just getting ahead of it, we hope you're leaving with something useful. Subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if we earned it, leave us a review. It helps more people find the show. We'll see you next time. This is Restoration 101, brought to you by Restoration 1 of Austin.